also like if you go to like the Baluba traditions, right? Like the Baluba, which was actually reconstructed and historically verified by Jan Van Sina in the 60s. The Luba traditions correlate well with the Bantu-speaking populations interacting with people known as pygmies in that area and having good relations. Let me even post a source on this because.
So you're telling me that the Bantus just, had their Bantu expansion and none of them went to war with pygmies or Khoisan or Kushites. It was all peaceful. It was a peaceful expansion into sub-Saharan Africa where they just kind of got along with the autochthonous population and didn't have any type of conflict. They just traded flowers with each other, essentially.
What do you think I think about?
That's what I'm thinking that you're saying, bro.
No, so I think that now you're doing the other extreme, right? You're trying to accuse me of an extreme, and now like we're doing the other. Sorry, in that exact. Sorry, my bad. But I feel like we're going to from two extremes here. Why can't it be in the middle? I believe personally that there's not a lot of evidence of forceful conquest and domination of pygmy speakers. But there are notable exceptions to this, which is the history of Rwanda. If you look at the traditions of Gatwa and Rwanda, what they do show is that there was a caste system where it says that Kigwa had 3 sons, Gahutu, Gatusi, and Gatwa, and Gatwa was on the bottom, which did imply a caste system. And what's funny enough is that in the Kingdom of Rwanda, a lot of the Twa were like descripted as so.
You can keep talking, but I need to take care of something really quick.
Go ahead, brother. I'm listening.
Yeah, I'm trying to read something as well. Oh, is that a hair in my mouth? Sorry. Yeah, I'm trying to read something as well. So,
yeah, but it's not an extreme. It's just an observation of people moving into one region from another region, and their males are out competing the males that are there. I don't know why is this a big hang up with you. And I think it's a hang up because of the word, because you don't want the word colonizer to be applicable to your ancestors, which is just silly.
No, so in the beginning of this conversation, I already kind of said that there's a bit a discrepancy between your definition and my definition of colonizer. If you're talking about like immigrants who established settlements, I don't mind our ancestors being called that because they quite literally were. But if we're referring to like people who subjugated people and imposed a form of political authority on another and dominated, I think that is very the evidence is not unanimously proven for that.
It's not proven. What evidence not proven for what now?
For all of my ancestors being people, or not even all, but my ancestors being people who imposed political domination on others and forcefully assimilate.
That's exactly West African history. I don't know what you're talking about. From ancient times to present.
Not necessarily.
You have war bands going to other people, forcing them to assimilate or die. Like lay down get down and lay down.
This can be true for some regions, but it doesn't have to be true for everybody.
For most of the dominating West African polities, it is true. It's not even just Africa.
So
it's like worldwide. I don't know why this is an issue. You see a dynasty or a kingdom arise, and then they begin to take over. Like they all practice some form of imperialism.
For my ethnic group, for my village group, no. There's actually like a lot of us live in decentralized policies. And look at the source I sent in the chat. Hold on, it's saying I already sent that before. Let me wait. Like there were some people who like. There were some people who descended from like empire, like if people who founded empires, sure, like, but there's political diversity. Like there were independent chiefdoms, there were decentralized kingdoms, there were places that were just village groupings. So like history is diverse in that way. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
But can you acknowledge that there was a reduction of males? Can you at least acknowledge that?
There's a reduction of male haplogroup lineage, but I wouldn't say a reduction of males. Like, for example, right? If I went to like somewhere in Eurasia, right, or let's say Western Europe, and I had a kid with a European woman, and for a portion of time, like if my people had kids with European women and their Y chromosome haplogroup is I haven't done a DNA test, so I can't say what mine is. But if it's like a higher frequency of a paternal haplogroup, yeah. So I'm if I go to Europe and I have kids to European women, and those women have a higher frequency of a African haplogroup, I wouldn't think that's reducing males, because there's no males that are being killed in expense of that hap.
Yeah, but you're going to Europe with a population already established, right? That's already got a large male population that outnumbers yours, correct? We're not talking about that with ancient Bantu agrarians migrating southward and westward. We're talking about there are already hunter-gatherer groups there. They already have their populations, right, skirting across these regions for thousands and thousands of years until the Bantus get there and displace them, right, and replace
I wouldn't say
them.
displaced. There's no evidence of them being displaced.
There's a lot of evidence, because rainforest hunter-gatherers would have been a lot more. They would have been dispersed more over the continent of Africa than they are today. Even the Khoisan, they got pushed out and replaced.
Yeah, about the Kushites.
Yeah.
Actually, so I have to review my notes on that one. I have to review my notes on that one, because I've studied this like years ago. But yeah, I just had to review my notes on that one. But when it comes to pygmies, the main evidence we do have of conquest and domination is like in some Great Lakes kingdom, like Rwanda. I do like to say it did happen there, but the evidence simply doesn't show for like Cuba or like the Luandan coast. Like the evidence doesn't show that these pygmies.
Yeah, evidence shows
what there is evidence for is a language shift in these pygmy speaking peoples, and them and iron technology diffusing to these people. But I wouldn't say that's displacement. That's just cultural contact. Like there's even evidence of language shifts in West Africa, right? If you look at the 19th century Africa, you had the Hausa speaking peoples establishing like little like communities known as zongos, where there's like mobile libraries, and they were trading coconuts, and people were adopting and speaking the Hausa language. This doesn't mean that the Hausa conquered or subjugated these people, because this came through trade, and this is for a large part.
Watch this, brother. What is the distinct language of rainforest hunter-gatherers?
We don't know.
You know why we don't know?
Because
it's the Niger-Congo. Exactly. They got all those things got replaced and displaced. Even their language element is gone. What are we talking about?
Actually, I wouldn't say necessarily the language.
When white people do this, when they bring in it, and then you have cultural domination, you say that's colonization. We clearly see this in West Africa. Like, this is without a doubt.
Actually,
the rainforest hunter-gatherers do not have or retain a semblance of what their distinct language group would have been.
Wait, hold on.
They don't.
Hold on. And I don't think that's true, but
the Bantus did what the Spanish did to the Aztec.
Exactly.
Hold on. So I would say on that, right? People switching languages doesn't automatically mean that these people were forcefully subjugated into speaking a language. Languages are adopted by people for various reasons, such as economics. People adopt languages to trade better in certain regions where it will be more beneficial to them. Number two, culture and religion. You find when people, for example, in the Roman Empire, although they conquered the Greeks, but they ended up adopting the Greek language. So that doesn't necessarily mean that adopting a language means that you're having conquest, because the Romans were the ones conquering the Greeks, but like up to 200 AD, they're the ones speaking the Greek language. So there's multiple factors that can be possible for these people that you simply don't have positive evidence of to assert one narrative over the other.
Yeah, there is positive evidence. You have the cultural aspect of it. We clearly see their culture get eroded. And you mentioned earlier in this conversation that we're having that was a sign of colonialism. We also see that their males are being reduced. You also said, well, I had to, it's like pulling teeth with you. But I had to make you agree with the reduction of males. But no, you kind of wiggled out. You tried to wiggle out of that too.
Reduction of males. So hold on. So intermixing people automatically kills males. I don't know that.
No.
Human reproduction automatically reduces males.
It does, because what's happening is the males are being reduced, and they're taking the females, and now you got to compete with these people for your own females. And they're mixing with those females and making progeny and producing progeny, which these people are not doing it. That's why we see we see their amounts shrink, and the E1B1A variants that come down and migrate, they grow in number. They're on opposite vectors, and that's very clear. This is why hunter-gatherer groups don't represent that many people in sub-Saharan Africa in comparison to E1B1A, which is more widespread and ubiquitous, as you say. So I mean, it's obvious. Like, I don't know why we even having this discussion, Youngs.
Okay, so there's multiple factors that can explain the shift in a predominance of a Y chromosome haplogroup. Number one, male-specific bottlenecks, which can be reduction in males. Number two, social or cultural selection. One group of males, fathers, can have more children than others. That doesn't necessarily mean that males were reduced. Number three, migration or conquest, where a group of incoming males with different Y lineage can replace or overwhelm local males. But there's different factors that contribute to a Y chromosome haplogroup being predominant. I don't think it's just like reducing males. That sounds overly simple.
Well, no one's saying it's just reducing males. We gave you the impetus on the reduction of the males. The impetus is the Bantus that are expanding into these territories with advanced weapons and technology that the males that are there cannot overcome. So yes, they get reduced over time.
But you're making an argument from what you're doing. You're making
arguments from the evidence that's available. That's what I'm doing.
That's an argument from silence, because let me explain why it's an argument from silence. Hold on. There's no evidence. Hold on. The burden of proof is on you. The onus is on you to prove that there was violent conflicts that led to the drastic decrease in the Mbudi population in the Neolithic period of the Bantu expansion. And somebody who literally tries to reconstruct the history of Central African history was Jan Bansina. And what he did find was peaceful coexistence of kingdoms like the Luba and Kuba and Pygmy-speaking populations. And I already gave a counterexample to kind of steelman your point, which was the Rwandan tradition, but this does not speak unanimously for the Bantu people in large. That's all I'm saying.
No one's talking about the Bantu people at large, but we are discussing the expansion event, where you had a people with advanced technology, iron tools, iron weapons, because they were deforesting the regions. That's how they made the expansion even possible, correct? And they run into people that don't have that technology, that are still essentially in a stone age, correct? And when they run into these people leave these regions or get expelled from these regions. These male lineages dissipate. They're displaced and replaced, but we see a retention of women, which you ain't explained yet. Why the hell we see the women being retained, but we don't see the males being retained at the same clip.
Well, actually,
If
Y
this happen
chromosome
anywhere. Y chromosome what?
Y chromosome and mtDNA frequencies doesn't necessarily indicate population. It does it just indicates frequency of a lineage over another and how many children they produce, but it doesn't necessarily indicate the population of,
Actually,
if you like, for example,
exactly,
right, if you found like 47% of people with R1B over like 50% of them with 15% of them with E1B1A, this would just mean that population that that spread R1B had more kids. That's all it means. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that any female or male was reduced and subjugated as a result of that.
No,
It can mean that if you have other evidence to corroborate with that, but that in itself doesn't mean.
and we can just look at Native Americans as an example. Like, we find almost no R1B markers among ancient Native American remains that are estimated.
And you know what else we find amongst
most of these Native Americans are like Q and C. Like, this was the autochthonous Native American lineage, Q and C. But then around 1492 up into the modern day, we start seeing a lot of R1B among North America, South America, Central America, and Canada. And today, if you look at most people in Canada, North America, and South America, Central America, most of these people are R1B, even among the Hispanic population. A lot of R1B, very little Q, very little C. Why is that?
What else? You know what else we find in Native Americans? We find archaeological evidence, fossil evidence, and historical records that show conquest or colonization.
True. We find the same thing when it comes to.
So I'm saying that that's the reason why we're able to. So I'm saying that's the reason for why we're able to indicate that there was a genocide of these people and an absorption of them into a dominant European culture. Now, what we do find in West Africa, in Central Africa with the Pygmies, is diverging historical and archaeological records that show different events happening in particular places. The main evidence we have of political domination on the Pygmies is in Rwanda. That's the main evidence we have. I already gave counterexamples with Cuba. I don't even know why we're ignoring that. It seems like that's just being thrown out the window here. But we also do find various Central African traditions recognizing them as autochthons and evidence of diffusion and coexistence with these people.
If there was such a coexistence, then why don't they speak their own language then? Why do they have a Niger Congo language? Because if it's peaceful, I'll be speaking the language of my forefathers. If it's peaceful, like, why is there a language shift? Like,
there could be
they
various
should
reasons
be
for why
speaking the language of their forefathers, but they're speaking Niger Congo languages.
Hold on, there's various reasons for why people absorb languages. I already gave you the example of Hausa being the dominant L1 in places in West Africa outside of Hausa land. Not because the Hausa politically dominated other people in West Africa, which you don't have evidence for.
But because they actually did do that. Okay.
Which colony in West Africa is from Hausa people politically?
What?
Give me a state in West Africa that is of Hausa origin politically imposing themselves on others.
So tell me you don't know the history of the Hausa.
I'm asking you.
Okay, so where are the Hausa at? Where are they at?
They're in.
Are they just in Nigeria? Where else are they?
And southern Niger.
Exactly. Right? So these people expanded, correct?
They did expand.
Okay. How do you expand?
Migration. It doesn't have to. You don't. Not every
migration, domination, and subjugation. That's how you do that.
Hold on. If you consider,
you bring other people under your fold by dominating them, bro. We're not
synonymizing expansion and domination. Hold on. What you're synonymizing though? You're synonymizing expansion with political conquest, when it could be migration,
The
like
Hausa
or
are the
immigration. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
They're the biggest group in North Africa. In Nigeria. I don't know. I'm saying North Africa. In Nigeria for a reason.
Why is
because of expansion, domination, and subjugation. They have a long history of.
not necessarily.
I don't know why.
Do you know who primarily speaks Hausa as their L?
You said who?
Do you know who primarily speaks Hausa as their L2? And I can give you the sources later.
Just go ahead and tell me. No, I don't know off the back.
Communities that were established amongst trade networks set up by the Hausa selling cola and nut. And what you find is you don't have, like, when it comes to the cola trade in West Africa, like Hausa outside of southern Niger and northern Nigeria do not have political establishments in western areas, west of that area.
What are you talking about? Okay, what's the point?
It's quite simple. So west of southern Niger and west of northern Nigeria, you do not have Hausa political settlements, but you do have a large portion of people who speak Hausa as their main or second language. But these people weren't politically dominated by the Hausa, meaning that they adopted it through church.
Do you know the history of the Hausa?
I do know the history of the Hausa, and I'm willing to debate.
On what? The city-states.
Yeah, I
how they adopted Islam, how they expanded there. They didn't stop.
How did they adopt Islam?
I said how they adopted Islam. What are you talking about?
I'm asking you, how did they adopt Islam?
I can give you that, but we're not going to get off track here. You said they didn't have.
You didn't expand politically. Get back to the whole question about the pig.
Okay, I will answer that, but I want to talk about this right here. When you said that the Hausa didn't expand politically or some bullshit like that, I didn't
say that though. Hold on. I said west of southern Nigeria and west of northern Nigeria, the Hausa did not expand politically.
Okay.
But what you do find is that west of southern Nigeria west of northern Nigeria and west of Nigeria, you do find a large community of millions of people who speak the Hausa language as their L1 or L2.
Well, my point was this: the Hausa are known for conquering, dominating, and subjugating other groups. I don't know why you would even argue.
Okay, so which groups did they dominate or subjugate?
They're neighboring groups in West Africa. What are you talking about?
Which groups west of them?
I didn't say west. They're neighboring groups, period.
Right, but I'm talking about Hausa. So the majority of the Hausa-speaking communities outside of this area of southern Nigeria and northern Nigeria is in west of
You don't become the biggest ethnic group in Nigeria by accident.
What you find is a majority of people like who speak this as a second language are in northern Benin, northern Ghana, Burkina Faso, like this area. Like this is the majority secondary Hausa linguistic area. I can even show you a map on my PTR. So why do the people speak this language? Because they're all colonized and
Yeah, that's how it works. That's how your language or your culture expands further or stronger than other ones. That's the main impetus. I don't know why you're not being an adult about this. Everything's not peaches and creams.
By the way, Jashu, do you want to give a quick little recap?
Yeah, they weren't
for new people who might be confused on the topic. I want to give a quick little recap.
Wait, hold on. Did you just say there's no evidence of them conquering and colonizing?
Nope. Oh no, west of that area.
Can you give a quick recap for the new people?
You said what now?
A quick recap for the new people in the room, explaining what we're talking about, and then y'all can get back into it.
Man, we are discussing that West Africans are the descendants of colonizers. Why we are talking about this? Because this man says he does not want to have any dealings with South Africaners because they are descendants of colonizers. I'm like, well, most West Africans are literally descendants of colonizers. This is how this whole argument started. We went to the point that many of the people that are in Benin, Togo, Nigeria, the Chad Basin, literally come from a southward migration in the west of Africa, from agro-pastoralists that come down south, bringing down pearl millet. And when they came south, they reduced and replaced the males that were there. We literally read sources on this. And not only they reduced the people, they reduced the culture, because we don't see their culture anymore. That culture got eliminated. The cultural dominance that we see in West Africa is mainly of Niger, Congo derivation. That's why we having this whole rigmarole about what a colonizer is and who colonized. And now this guy's denying that the Hausa people did not colonize, which is the biggest ethnic group in Nigeria.
I feel like you're purposely not listening to me so that you make this easier in
No,
the argument.
bro,
So
you've been
how about-
freedom.
Wait, hold on, wait. Hold on, wait.
I heard
What I said, and I'm repeating this for the 1,000th time, is that the Hausa did not politically subjugate anybody west of this area of southern Niger and northern Nigeria. West of these people, you have a community of people who speak Hausa as, like, millions of people who speak Hausa as a prominent language, but this is not because of political domination. It's because of trade and the fact that, okay, so prove it.
That's part of political domination. You dominate the damn trade route.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No,
what are you talking about?
That's not political. Political domination is when you're able to subsume another people to your government and your state and imposing them things like tributes or
yes, and that's West Africa. Yes, Hausa did that. Many West African polities did that.
Yeah, Mali, Ghana.
What the hell?
They asked for tributes for sure.
But that's just a whataboutism, though, which doesn't answer what I'm saying.
That's not a whataboutism.
That's not a whataboutism.
That's on topic. What are you talking about?
Just because other groups did that doesn't necessarily mean that it had to be the same case for the Hausa to establish trade networks. And what
you understand the Hausa are a 1,500-year-old policy? Do you understand that? The Hausa were capturing slaves.
They're primarily composed of 7 city-states and then other diasporic city-states. So you're not even right on that.
The 5th, 6th century. No, well, we see it start in around the 5th and 6th century. Correct?
That's not necessarily true either. How old is Darwa? Is that
just type it in.
So Darwa. So the queen. So according to the Hausa Darwa Chronicles, the story of Ajita.
We don't need folklore. We don't need folklore.
Hold on, wait. This is the main. Hold on. This is the main. Hold on.
Hold
Go on mute, bro. Hold on, wait. Hold on.
No, I want you to go to the academic. I don't want to hear oral testimony, bro.
Hold on, wait. Hold on. It's not oral testimony. Hold on, number one. Hold on, wait. So number one, right? It's not oral testimony. So what we do find the evidence of, based on the historical records like the Hausa, the Darwa Chronicle and the Kano Chronicle, is that the earliest Hausa city-state, which is probably Darwa, originated in the 9th century AD. This is a consensus by not only their primary sources, but historians like Philip Jagar. And I can provide you the sources if you want on this.
So the 9th century AD.
I want to get back to the Pygmies, but all I'm saying is that just because people speak Hausa as an L2 in the places west of Niger and Nigeria, doesn't mean that these people were all politically dominated by Hausa. So therefore, it's proving my point on the Pygmies, saying that Pygmies adopting Bantu languages doesn't automatically mean that these people were politically subjugated or dominated. Because there could be multiple reasons. There could be multiple reasons for why people adopt a majority of a language, right? People today, although there was a global colonization by English, people today are adopting English because of trade and practical reasons, right? But when it comes to the Hausa, people were adopting their language because of trade, but you don't have evidence of them having political states in areas west of Niger and Nigeria.
They dominated.
Even in
They dominated Sudanic kingdoms, bro.
Which one did they dominate? And where's the political evidence of this? You're speaking from you're arguing but there's no positive evidence to prove yourself.
Of course. But you over here making shit up all night.
I'm not making it up. I can literally prove to you how Hausa originated as a trade language, and it's not gonna look good for you. So let me actually do that.
No, everything is not like you're trying to paint this,
yeah. So let me just post this
marshmallow shit. It doesn't exist in history. It doesn't.
That's not what I said.
People were conquerors. These people were conquerors. They were imperialistic.
Okay, so let me just post this source and prove you wrong. Okay, so
you're not proving nothing wrong, brother. You're not gonna make this kingdom into some soft ass shit. That doesn't happen.
Wait, which kingdom are you referring to? Are you referring to Kano, Zadia, Sokoto, Gobir, Kebi? Which one are you referring to? Because Houses don't even have one kingdom, which is even proving wrong.
We understand that the Hausa states were city states. I understand all that, bro. What the fuck are you talking about?
Okay, so let me just quote from John Elif here. So let me quote from John Elif. So it says such networks extending from across environmental borders were the main form of West African commercial organization. The earliest comprised of Soninke traders of Ghana, later renowned as itinerant leaders of donkey caravans. When Mali supplanted Ghana, many Soninke formed the nucleus of a larger multi-ethnic Muslim Mandinka-speaking trading class, while most were commonly known as Jula, who chiefly traded gold, cola, and cloth. While many Jula were traveling merchants, others settled in foreign territory, established local ties, and it created a diaspora through trade could pass across political and ethnic borders from the forest to the desert and from the Atlantic to Hausaland. Further east, itinerant merchants from Borno specialized in salt and horses, while the kingdom also operated as a state trading system across the Sahara that was unique in the region's otherwise free enterprise economy. From perhaps the 15th century, however, Hausa traders emerged as competitors and created a diaspora on Jula lines that became most extensive in the continent. Hausa traders relied especially on a currency of cowrie shells imported from the Indian Ocean via North Africa, whose uniqueness, durability, supply, utility, and small transactions gave them great advantages over the local currencies used in the forest regions. And let me also quote on the Hausa Zongo, and this is from Africans: The History of a Continent by John Elif, page 85.
How does any of this prove that they did not expand, dominate, and subjugate?
Because it says that it was. It says that how so.
We understood they dominated trade. In order to dominate these trade routes, that means they gotta have power. Like you're just showing domination and subjugation. That's all you're showing.
Okay, so it says
you're not disproving anything. This is a very rich and powerful kingdom, correct? Or kingdoms.
Not one.
You want to get paid.
Wait, my point is that these kingdoms didn't establish political subjugation, because if you did, you would have other political areas and villages being set up to this kingdom and paying tribute to them. But let me just post on the Zongo, because I feel like it's going to be much less ambiguous.
These people. Okay, so let's talk about the kings of Canaan. The kings of Canaan would enslave other groups, right?
The kings of who?
Canaan.
The kings of Canaan.
Canaan, yes.
Did they extract tribute from their neighbors?
Yes.
Okay, then. Why are we having this discussion? You're being ridiculous.
You're being ridiculous here, because
no, you're being ridiculous.
Let me
prove
to you why you're being ridiculous.
And subjugated other groups.
Hold on, let me prove to you why you're being ridiculous here. Because number one,
it does seem like you're trying to paint this narrative of like a peaceful Africa where no one really conquered anybody. Everybody just kind of worked together.
Hold on, if you're listening, right? What counter example did I?
No, I said it seems like you're kind of painting this narrative.
Yeah, and I gave a counter example. What counter example did I?
No, you are pointing out.
You said that they were traders. Okay, yes, they traded.
No, hold on. we talked about. So you're saying that I'm painting a narrative that everything was rosy and no domination happened, right? So I gave an example of political domination that happened in Central Africa. What was that example?
Yeah, you gave that one example in Rwanda.
Exactly. So I'm not saying that unanimously everything was rosy and peaceful, because that was a counter example that I gave. It's proving
All right,
that.
so check it out. I'm gonna read a source. I'm just gonna read.
All I'm saying is that you can't argue. Hold on, you can't argue that. All I'm saying is that you can't argue that just because Pygmies adopted Bantu languages, the majority of them adopted Bantu languages, automatically means that these people were all dominated by Bantu speakers politically. That's just an argument from silence, because you're arguing based on.
That's just one element of it, because we also went the genetic element, where we see there's a sex bias when it comes to these populations with Bantus and Pygmies.
So stay right here on this house and shit, right? So we're on page 40 of the Oxford Handbook of Nigerian History, and it clearly states, open quote, the Hausa states were city-states in nature, which prospered as middlemen in the inter-regional trade, but also engaged in manufacturing activities such as cotton weaving and indigo dyeing. Kano occupied a strategically advantageous position in the region, situated in a fertile agricultural land with access to routes of commerce, both interregional and trans-Saharan. Cavalry formed a primary part of Kano's military. Kano inhabitants bred horses, which they then traded to the empires of the Niger Benue confluence and Benue Valley, such as the Koro Rofa Jukin, receiving enslaved people in return. Trade with the Southwest continued to flourish over the centuries for Kano, while direct commercial and cultural contacts with North Africa and Egypt through the Air region increased. To the east of Kano, the Empire of Kano emerged as a dominant power around Lake Chad, with a kingship ideology of a Sudanic sacred chief. The Chronicle of Dewan of Kano-Barno Empire attests the emergence of that state in the Chad Basin from the 8th through the 10th centuries. A long series, here you go, of military struggles with societies on the north side of Lake Chad marked this time period, which eventually led to the empire's expansion. Kano was located.
I actually cannot read, bro. I'm sorry,
Stop.
bro.
Shut up. Be quiet.
What is
Be quiet. You are against all of the. No, stop. We already showed that this was a dominant power that was expanding through military struggles.
Wait, what is kind of born?
Stop.
They're not houses.
Stop. Canaan was located in the key region of transshipment. One major route led north from the Chad Basin to Tripoli on the Mediterranean shore, and other lesser routes connected with the Air region to the northwest and Tibesti Mountains to the northeast. The kings of Canaan were known for extracting tribute from their neighbors and also granting tracts of land to their clients and supporters. Tribute formed an important source of their state's wealth, but their wars also gave them war captives to sell to the trans-Saharan slave trade via Tripoli to the Muslims areas of North Africa and indirectly the Middle East. The third support of the wealth and power of the state came from its early conquest. Of the South Central Saharan salt mines of Bilma, and thus control of this highly valued commodity of trade.
Yes,
shut up, just please, because I'm starting to wear thin. My patience wearing thin with you, with this goofy shit. The Seyfua dynasty of Kano began to establish control over the areas of Borno to the west and the south of Lake Chad in the late 13th century, leaving the old Canaan heartland north of the lake to be governed by lieutenants. Some historians have attributed this move southwest to increasing desertification of the areas of the north and east of Lake Chad, but better access to interregional and later international trade via commercial powers to the west, such as the Hausa states, and more distantly, Mali and later Songhai, may have been a potent attraction. As well, the empire kingdom after 1500 and its direct successor state Bornu remained a dominant factor in political and economic change of Nigeria's early history. In the 16th century, the Hausa city-states Zaria and Katsina emerged along with Kano as powerful and economically important states, benefiting from the new commercial connections to the south and west, and from their increased participation in the trans-Saharan trade. The trade route links would also become important for Bornu, which had entered a period of relative stability under Mai Ali Gaji, who established, and I believe you brought this person up too, who established a new and long-lasting capital at Ngazar Amu on the banks of Kamadugu Yobe. He reinforced the influence of Bornu on the Hausa states and established diplomatic and trading links with North Africa of much stronger nature than before. Due to increased interregional trade, connections to the religion of Islam became an important factor both in politics and commercial activities in Hausa land and the Kano-Borno region. Trade routes not only linked the regions more strongly in North Africa and Mediterranean world, but also to the farther away trading entrepots of the Western Sudan. In Borno in the 16th century, firearms imported from the Ottoman provinces of North Africa became part of the weaponry warfare against Borno's neighbors, increasing Borno's hegemony in the region. Firearms had also reached the Hausa states, again brought in across Sahara by traders from North Africa and the Middle East. These contacts not only led to increased cross-cultural encounter, but strengthened diplomatic relationships at the governmental level, leading to the increased officially sponsored commercial ties of Bornu with Tripoli and diplomatic missions as supplying ports of Ottomans in Istanbul and the Saadian rulers of Morocco during the 16th century. End quotes.
Okay, so, and two things you don't understand here are, number one, geography, and number two, you don't even know what Kano Bornu is. And it shows by the way you're supporting it in your argument, because anybody who knows about Kano Bornu will know that these people were not politically dominated by the Hausa. They were dominated by the Kanuri and the Tubu people in the Lake Chad area. These people were not ethnically Hausa, and in fact imposed a larger macro superstructure that dominated the Hausa politically. Hausa actually, and none of this proved my point, because none of the regions you mentioned indicated that the Hausa established political sovereignty west of northern Nigeria and west of Niger in areas like northern Benin, Burkina Faso, and Ghana. What you do find, though, is that Kano Bornu was a powerful state in the Lake Chad area that went as far as Tripoli in Libya, and they did establish trade routes that later Hausa states like Kano and Zaria were participant in. But even then, these trade routes are not the same as a cola trade that emerged in the 19th century that was established from the Ashanti area to Nupe territory to Zaria in Nigeria. And so I think if you know what Kano Bornu was, you'll see how this does not help your case at all.
It does, because you said that these people had nothing to do with the expansion, subjugation, domination of peoples. And I just read the history that they do.
Wait,
stop your bullshit. Cut your bullshit. First of all, cut your bullshit, because the whole reason we're having this little dialogue right here is because you don't want to admit that these people subjugated and dominated people. That's what you don't want to admit. And I just read in this source that they were involved with trading slaves, dominating polities, expansion, all the things that we've been talking about for the last 2 or 3 hours, wasting our goddamn time with you.
Okay, so who was Kano Bornu, and who was the who ethnically comprised this kingdom? Let's see if you understand something that's simple. Let's see if you understand something that's simple.
Hold on, stop moving the goddamn goalposts.
Nobody's moving
How
the
about
goalposts.
you admit that these people expand? Stop. Yo, you move the goalposts. You always do this. How about you admit that these people dominated and subjugated other groups? How about that?
Nobody was arguing the contrary. And
yes, you were. Yes, you were. That's why we having this dumbass argument.
Yeah, that's the reason why.
That's literally why we're going through this whole fucking rigmarole shit.
I'm explaining this for 1,000 times, right? And this is gonna be the last time I'm repeating what I'm saying. So I'm saying. So hold on, wait. So did you guys hear the word? Hold on, wait. So do you guys hear the words west of Niger and west of northern Nigeria?
Oh my God!
Did you guys hear that? Do I have to repeat that again?
Sure.
Okay.
But you are against that West African groups dominating subjugate groups. Then that's how we even got to the house.
I'm not against that.
Yeah, you're not now. Just got your ass.
Hold on, wait. So let me just say this, right?
Hold on, wait, man. I'm starting to lose patience.
So number two, right?
Hey, irritate them, bro.
Hold on. So number two, Number two, right? What did I say? I said Hausa as an L2 is spoken by millions of people in the areas west of Niger and west of northern Nigeria. And these people were not ever politically dominated or subjugated by the Hausa. But yet you find that these people still speak their language. So I'm using that as an example to show that language shifting or language acquisition does not only have to be a result of political conquest. That's all I'm saying here. And the evidence is on me because what you find. You
want to paint West African groups as humans. We try to make them look like they're gods or something, that they're good and they're not. There's no elements of evil in my shit.
I never said that.
Instead of being honest, stop. Instead of being honest and saying all females do this.
And if I saw is that these people have a large portion of Hausa speakers, but yet they were not politically ever dominated by the Hausa, but rather spoke that language through trade networks that were established by the Zongos, which are Muslim caravans that sell cola nut, bees, salt, Quranic books. But there's no evidence of political domination.
You don't become the largest ethnic group in Nigeria by accident. Like I said, it comes from years and years and years of domination, subjugation. You got to get over that shit.
Wait, so do you hear west of northern Nigeria and southern Niger? Did you hear that? Yes or no?
I heard that.
So
but it's just a escape mechanism.
Restate what I'm saying.
I'm not restating what you're saying. You know what? Hey, Ivory.
You understand what I'm saying?
Ivory, go ahead and continue this conversation, man. I'm done, bro. It's just this idiocy at its finest.
So I was just using it as an counterexample to show that the pygmies.
Conversation by just reading something really quick. By the way, earlier, did you say that you admire the work of Kevin McDonald, that you like his work, you read his work, you understand his work?
Yes, I've read his work, and I was actually about to quote him, but I forgot. But go ahead.
Cool. I'm going to read this really quick, and then we can probably end it here. Jishu, can you do a recap really quick for the new people in the room, and then I'm going to read this source. Because we got.
All right, so this whole conversation started because this Nigerian brother had a dispute with saying that E1B1A migrants displaced the foragers of West Africa, which would make them colonizers. I brought the counterpoint that when you're calling people in South Africa colonizers, they're the descendants of colonizers. I'm like, well, you are the descendant of colonizers. Like, well, how? And then we get into this whole West African debacle. Well, we do see a displacement of autochthonous groups by E1B1A migrants going south into West Africa and then expanding even further south and west with the Bantu expansion. And everywhere these motherfuckers go, they displacing the autochthonous males and they're taking their females. Now, if it was a European group, you'd be like, yeah, that's colonization. But since it's an African group, now we got to play games. So we went through several lines of evidence. We cited several papers showing the north to south vector that these people migrated into, interacting with the local forest hunter-gatherers, And when they interacted with these groups, these people seemed to reduce the male population, but retain the female population. There's obviously something going on there. Again, we see this with Native Americans in relationship with Europeans. Europeans come over to the Americas, and then they kill off many of the native populations, either through disease or through slavery or just basically conquest. What we'll call that? Oh, colonization. But when we see that happening in the West African groups, we can't call it what it is because we're biased and we want to act like West Africans are somehow full of rainbows and marshmallows and these benevolent people that don't do no wrong. And somehow we get all the way to the Hausa Kingdom, and we got to explain how they expanded, how they dominated trade route, how they interacted with their neighboring African tribes, and how they sold them into slavery, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, just not admitting these things, just idiocy at this point, and lunacy, because we want to uphold this bullshit idea about West Africans, because y'all keep thinking that these people are so pure and they're human like everybody else. Anyway, Avery, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. So as the shoe said, argument is just that, modern West Africans, those who carry E1B1A, clearly have a north to south migration, and they would have expanded, dominated, and absorbed, as well as forced assimilation on the West African hunter-gatherers. And the brother that we're speaking to values the work of Kevin McDonald. So I'm going to read a source from Kevin McDonald. And we're just going to hear what he has to say on this idea of people from the north, and the north of West Africa is the Sahara, North Africa, the Sahara. So we're going to see what Kevin McDonald says about this, if there was any type of population replacement of the West African hunter-gatherers by a Saharan people. So without further ado, let's begin. So right here is the source that I am going to read. And the source is, let me see if you want to follow along. Archaeology, Language, and the Peopling of West Africa. Archaeology and Language, Book 2, by the way, by Kevin McDonald. And I'm going to be on page 44. I'm going to read several different pages, though. But I'm starting on 44. I'll tell you when I get to another page. So we're going to read right here in this section. It says, elsewhere there is evidence that West African savanna forest hunter-gatherers survived as discrete populations until the end of the first millennium AD. It may be that small dispersed bands of indigenous West African hunter-gatherers persisted in isolated regions until circa 1,000 years before present, being entirely absorbed into surrounding agricultural populations after that point. Indeed, the oral traditions, because this brother likes oral traditions, so I'm going to read this as well. Indeed, the oral traditions of modern West African agricultural societies often cite their groups' replacement of indigenous hunting peoples upon entering their present lands. I'm going to read that again. Indeed, the oral traditions of modern West African agricultural societies often cite their groups' replacement of indigenous hunting peoples upon entering their lands. Perhaps the best model, and it says, e.g., the Soninke myth of Dinga. So anyways, it says, perhaps the best model for understanding this phenomenon is that represented by Vincent from the acculturation of Central African pygmy populations within the past 2,000 years by Bantu agriculturalists. The more recent acculturation and replacement of such groups in West Africa has unfortunately left only the merest of
of traces for us to observe. So I'm going to go now to the next section of this book. We're still in his book. So now we are on page 48. So a few pages down, page 48. So reading the section that says archaeology and the lost languages of West Africa. And it reads, an hypothesis advocating the existence of now disappeared hunter-gathering cultures in West Africa stemming from coastal and forest Ogolian refuge populations has already been advanced. In terms of material culture, the LSA, late Stone Age, traditions of sub-Saharan West Africa show little evidence of direct cultural contact with the Saharan sphere until the recent Holocene. The answer to these questions may come from a number of directions. Time for the total assimilation of these populations would be greater in West Africa than in Central Africa, beginning more or less throughout the region by 4,000 years before present. These populations would usually have dwelt in more accessible territory, accessible terrain than in the equatorial forests. Additionally, one can advance a recently recorded language isolate from northeast Nigeria as more concrete linguistic evidence for a vanished people than has yet come from equatorial forests. So basically what he's saying is like, this original population that was in West Africa is completely gone, completely vanished, even compared to that in equatorial Africa with the Bantus and the Pygmies there. What was once in West Africa is completely gone. So it says following the let's see, where am I? All right, so it says following the model of interactive assimilation advanced by Vincent, 1990, for the Central African Pygmies, one may assume a gradual process of absorption for these groups. The most northerly vanished hunter-gatherers living along the Middle Niger would have first encountered Saharan immigrants in the mid-Holocene. They may have learned from them the techniques of ceramic and polished stone manufacture, which could have filtered southward through a stemless diffusion. Others may have acquired livestock. Eventually, those groups in the main zone of contact, the modern Sahel, would have become acculturated and lost their original languages. And the brother left. Anyways, I will keep reading. So it says, then they, well, let me go back and reread that last part because you jumped out. It says, eventually those groups in the main zone of contact, well, let me go back a little bit more. It says, others may have acquired livestock. Eventually those groups in the main zone of contact, the modern Sahel, would have become acculturated and lost their original languages. It says, then they like the Central African Pygmies would have interacted with incoming groups, acting as guides into this new land until they were economically and numerably overwhelmed. Just how long they continue to survive as a distinct type of society is unknown, although a date in the late first millennium AD would stem likely. Physically, these groups may have been absorbed eventually into encroaching northern and eastern groups, resulting in little genetic traces of their existence remaining. Linguistically, isolates such as Jala may represent the sole clue we have to their existence outside of archaeology and deep time oral traditions of vanished indigenous populations. Fascinating. And so it says right here, I'm not quite done yet. It says right here, when one considers the African populations of the terminal Pleistocene, the seemingly unified physical type of those dwelling in North African refugia, i.e. Mectoids, and their eventual cultural assimilation of contemporary populations living in West African coastal refugia, then language homelands for Niger-Congo and Nilo-Saharan between the Maghreb and the Nile Valley are strongly suggested. Essentially, it's believed that the language family Niger-Congo was somewhere between the Maghreb, which is northwest Africa, and the Nile Valley. That's where it would originate. It says further, in the insight of the Niger-Saharan microphylum hypothesis, a sort of unity for Niger-Saharan speakers would seem likely during the late and terminal Pleistocene, circa 20,000 through 12,000 years before present. Such a situation with a rapid diversification of these languages as populations spread out at the beginning of the first Holocene wet phase, circa 2,000 years before present, would accord with archaeological data much better than, for instance, Eretz. And then it says now here, in essence, a Niger-Saharan model for an archaeological perspective would progress as follows. Proto-Niger-Saharan speakers may be represented by the post-Aturian Mectoid refuge populations of the North African littoral and highland circa 20,000 years before present. Language diversification could have begun during the Ogolian hyper-arid 20,000 through 12,000 years before present. So when it comes to these populations, actually it says, let me keep reading that, actually it says, with its consequent production of population isolates, undoubtedly language diversification would have acculturated when populations began to expand into the Sahara from the North African refuge at the beginning of the Holocene between 12,000 and 10,000 years before present. So essentially, there is very clear evidence of populations from the north migrating into the south. And the populations that were in West Africa originally, these hunter-gatherer populations, were the language being used is absorbed, assimilated, vanished even. So there's definitely something massive going on here from the Saharan immigrants from the north coming into the south. And even, it says right here, it is proposed that the peopling of the Sahara was thus broad-based and did not stem from any particular North African region. The first colonists, very interesting, Kevin McDonald is using the word colonist. The first colonists of the Holocene Sahara would have been arid, adapted hunter-gatherers who would have lived out of the Ogolian on the edge of the vast terminal Pleistocene Sahara. To the east, similar peoples may have been responsible for the indigenous domestication of African cattle, sort of 10,000 through 8,000 years before present, as an economic adaptation to the climate uncertainties of a still periodically arid landscape. So again, also it says right here, these early pastoral populations may have lost their true Mectoid physical status by this time, both through dietary change and through interbreeding with other earlier Holocene populations. So Kevin McDonald pretty much agrees with Shub and I's assessment that you do have Saharan migrants, you do have a people coming from the north into West Africa, and they are absorbing, forcing assimilation and making people vanish, their languages vanish in West Africa. And he says that this was like a total replacement in West Africa. And the Bantu expansion, the Bantu agriculturalists, it wasn't as severe, but it was basically the same thing. And so I think it's pretty clear cut. And even if we look at the DNA, we see that E1B1A, it also has north to south migration, and it wasn't in West Africa like 30,000 years ago and things of that nature. It wasn't in West Africa 20,000 years ago. Like if we look at the Shumlaka remains, they carried haplogroup A00, B, L0, L1, things of that nature. And yeah, it seems to be obvious that when these E1B1A markers went into West Africa, they're carrying particular genes with them
such as the turf autosomal makeup at 13% in the Yoruba population. So yeah, north to south migration, a vanishing of another people, the vanishing of another people's language, another people's genetics, and then new elements coming in such as agropastoralism, which has a northern origin. It's there's no getting around the fact that pastoralism came into Africa from the Middle East, went into the Central Sahara, the Green Sahara, went into West Africa. Agropastoralism came from outside of West Africa. Various elements of agriculture also would have came from the north, like the domestication of pearl millet from northern Mali and northern Mauritania. So it's like, I don't know. I think it's just pretty obvious at this point. Just by going through Kevin Daniels' work alone. Kevin Daniel agrees with us.
So I actually wanted to cite the same paper. This is actually what I was going to cite earlier. So I want to read on page really started from page 40, because it gives so much context here about who these hunter-gatherers might have been, and this is just one out of many models he proposes out of the migration of hunter-gatherers in West Africa, right? Starting from page 39, where it says in the section, peopling from the South. So it's saying, a surprisingly negative aspect of the peopling of West Africa and the Sahara is the importance of an explicitly sub-Saharan African input. Sub-Saharan African populations lived out in the Golden Hyperregion, circa 20,000 to 12,000 BP, in coastal refugia, and in areas which are now part of West Central Forest Zone. Indeed, from Sumlaka Rock Shelter and Umbi Crater in Cameroon, we now have occupational sequences spanning at least the last 30,000 and 12,000 years, respectively. Yet, as we move to the west, our earliest dates appear to be more recent. Potentially, this may indicate a retreat of populations into the eastern corner of West Africa during the peak Hyperregion, or may simply reflect a small amount of late Stone Age research in this region. In Nigeria, the earliest known occupation during the terminal Pleistocene is that of the basal layers at Iwo Alero, where human remains and a non-geometric microlithic industry have been dated to as early as 11,200, give or take 200 BP. In southern Ghana, at the opening air sites of the Temet West and Asakrona, sand formations dating to the Golden Hyperregion have been shown to contain rare traces of prepared core industries. Finally, the Bingerville Highway site in southern Ivory Coast provided a non-geometric microlithic industry dated on associated charcoal to 13,000, give or take 230 BP. Thus, it would appear that by at least circa 12,000 BP, the West African littoral was occupied by scattered groups of hunter-gatherer peoples. At some point after 12,000 BP, these indigenous populations began an expansion northwards, which is attested to by an increasing density of non-geometric and geometric quartz microlithic industries from the coast as far north as Mali before 8,000 BP and Burkina Faso. Additionally, there appears to be some persistence or reinvention of prepared core flake industries during the early Holocene of the modern Sahel zone. These industries, whose primary tool type consists of large scrapers, are known from imprecisely dated late Pleistocene and early Holocene contexts in the Sahel from Senegal to Niger. The point of origin for these macrolithic occurrences is difficult to fix at present. They may have simply been regional adaptations of microlith fabricating peoples denied all but the coarse raw material types, or they may present a second discrete sub-Saharan tradition. So this section is archaeological evidence for the mid-Holocene peopling of West Africa. By as early as the 8th millennium BP, it is possible that pastoralists and the domestic cattle had entered the Sahara. Despite this new economic adaptation, which was well dispersed by 5,500 BP, specialized fishing peoples and generalized hunter-gatherers were to persist in West Africa throughout the mid-Holocene. Tantalizingly, it is this period of pastoral expansion that we have many self-depictions by the region's inhabitants of the Saharan rock art corpus. From such depictions, it is well evidenced that we are not dealing with ethnic homogeneity within mid-Holocene pastoral societies. Scattered throughout the Central Saharan are some stone piles and circles thought to be the hearse and windbreak foundations of vanished nomads. Gabriel, after undertaking years of systematic researches on these steinplats have been able to establish an impressive group of radiocarbon determinations placing their probable age between 8,500 and 3,800 BP, with one of the greatest temporal concentration being between 5,800 and 5,000 BP. At one of these sites known as Aneri Bardag, cattle remains have been identified in context dated to between 7,635 and 5,060 BP on 3 C14 determinations. I think you got the hash of this part down, but let me continue reading because I don't want to jump through this reading. So y'all can stop me if I'm being too verbose. At one of these sites, known as Aneri Bardag, cattle remains have been identified in context dating to between 7,635 and 5,060 BP on 3 C14 determinations. If Gabriel Steinplatz were indeed inhabited by pastoralists by 8,000 to 7,500 BP, then weight would be added to Weindorf and Scheil's argument for indigenous African cattle domestication in the Eastern Sahara between 9,500 and 8,000 BP. If not, then one will place the initial penetration of the Central Sahara by pastoralists between 7,000 and 6,000 BP, when more substantial and well-documented faunal assemblages bearing both cattle and ovicaprine remains are known from T. Torha North and 1 Mu'igigag in the Tadras Akakas, and from Teen Hanakatan in the Tassili near Ajer. In any event, it is likely that these early pastoral populations derived from northeastern Africa, where domestic stock would have been available either as an indigenously or a Levantine import. From 5,500.
I mean, you can keep reading, but I know the rest of this. This entire section reads about pastoral peoples in the Sahara, and just to
correct.
None of this disproves what I'm saying, because by the way, when it comes to like these pastoral peoples, like the Takakori population, they weren't sub-Saharan African genetically. They carried mitochondrial in, and they were autosomally like 7% Natufian and like 93% ancestral North African. So like,
yeah,
this entire section with the pastoral peoples does not help. They weren't sub-Saharan African. So
yeah, but look,
but
he said. So look what McDonald said before this section. So before the section, McDonald actually argued that before 12,000 BP.
Yeah, even the section that he's reading before this section, it still doesn't disprove what McDonald says a couple of lines later, a couple of paragraphs later, that these West African hunter-gatherer populations were replaced. They vanished. Their language vanished. They were absorbed and assimilated, and were completely gone. Like, none of this is disproving what he's saying. Like, you read all that, but it's like, this doesn't disprove that there was a replacement in West Africa from West African hunter-gatherers by these Saharan immigrants. It literally says this. None of what you read.
Okay, so can I continue? So what I was trying to say, though, if you look at the section before the pastoralists, it's saying that instead of a purely north to south conquest, there was actually an expansion, according to McDonald. This is argued by Eleanor Scarry in subsequent sources, but McDonald says that there were forest populations in West Africa that did expand northwards, but these populations, these populations. Hold on, wait. Yeah, so these populations, though, although there was northward expansion, he does explicitly say on page 40 that these were scattered and sparse. Sorry, these are scattered. He doesn't say sparse, but
yeah, it doesn't say that.
But also, if you look in the section of further south, further down, where it's talking about the hunter-gatherer peoples, it still says that late in the mid-Holocene, there was coexistence of hunter-gatherer populations and later agricultural groups in the same regions, and some archaeological technology expanding quite late in the archaeological record, which means that the culture wasn't necessarily erased. And further on, let me read this section, right? Who said that? Oh, let me ignore that. So if you look further south, right, this is what he says on page 43 to 44. verse 44, the same paragraph you quoted, right? It says literally before that, elsewhere there's evidence that West African savanna forest hunter-gatherers survived as discrete populations until the end of the first millennium AD.
Right.
Of course, microlithic industries showing topological continuity from the predecessors have been dated since surprisingly recent times. And
It may be
that small dispersed
bands. Yep.
yeah, persisted in isolated regions until 1000 BP before entirely being absorbed into surrounding agricultural populations after that point.
Yes.
And you know what's interesting? Do you know the work you cited though about traditions about replacement? This is the Soninke myth of Dinka. Dinga. Yeah, so the myth of Dinga is about the Ghana Empire expanding and them establishing political hegemony over neighboring groups. Not only exclusive to the hunter-gatherers, but exclusive to other, the Bozo and the Nono people, and even some parts of Senegambia. So they're just talking about political hegemony happening here.
Still, we're talking about people being pushed out, people being moved, people being replaced. And it says right here, indeed, the old traditions of modern West African agricultural societies often cite their groups' replacement of indigenous hunting peoples upon entering their present lands. And even if we go down a little bit, even right here, it says perhaps the best model for understanding this phenomenon is that presented by Vincina for the acculturation of Central African pygmy populations within the past 2,000 years by Bantu agriculturalists. The more ancient acculturation and replacement of such groups in West Africa has unfortunately left only the merest of traces for us to observe. So I read this, by the way, earlier. So it's like he is agreeing with Teshub and I that there is replacement, there is absorption, there is assimilation, there is a vanishing of a people and their language. You're not going to get around this. McDonald is agreeing with us on this. You're reading that section about a few African hunter-gatherers going northward. I read that as well. It says right here, because I don't think you clicked on this, but it says right here that I read earlier that it says following the model of interactive simulation, again, following the model of interactive simulation advanced by Vincina for the Central African pygmies, one may assume a gradual process of absorption for these groups. The most northernly vanished hunter-gatherers living along the middle Niger, which of course is in the Sahel, would have first encountered Saharan immigrants in the mid-Holocene. So I actually did read about hunter-gatherers being in like the Sahel area. I never disagreed with that. But those hunter-gatherers in the Sahel got absorbed, they vanished because of these Saharan immigrants. So
can I respond to that?
You're not getting around this. You are literally trying to paint this picture of a.
Wait, hold on. I'm not trying to paint the picture because I already gave the example of the Ghana Empire, which is political domination, and I already gave the example of Rwanda earlier. But what I'm saying to you though is that these hunter-gatherers had microlithic assemblages that lasted until as late as 1000 AD, meaning that these people were practicing their.
Then it says they disappeared.
Where does it say? Hold on. It doesn't say vanish because nobody just vanishes in history. It doesn't say. There's nowhere in this paragraph where McDonald says vanish.
Oh yes.
Listen, hold on. Let me read the sentence you started from. So
hold on.
It may be that small dispersed bands of indigenous West African hunter-gatherers persisted in isolated regions until 1000 BP, entirely being absorbed into surrounding agricultural populations after that point. Indeed, the oral traditions of modern West African agricultural societies often cite the group's replacement of indigenous.
You're not even reading that part. It says right
Which page
here.
is it?
It's on page 48. It says it twice. So right here it says, additionally, one can advance a recently recorded language isolate from northeast Nigeria as more concrete linguistic evidence for a vanished people than has yet come from the equatorial forests. Yes, people did vanish. Let me keep reading. Following the model of interactive assimilation advanced by Benson for the Central African pygmies, one may assume a gradual process of absorption for these groups. The most northernly vanished, again, hunter-gatherers living along the middle Niger, just read this where it said vanished, would have first encountered Saharan immigrants in the mid-Holocene. Vanished is in this book. It says it twice in literally like 3 sentences. Vanished people, vanished hunter-gatherers, first encountered Saharan immigrants. Like, come on now. Folks were
Okay,
vanished.
so can I comment?
Go right.
So what we do find though is still, if you compare that with more recent studies like Eleanor Scarry, she does cite McDonald's claim that these populations did expand northwards into the Sahara. She just says the fossil evidence is limited for that, but also like what new studies show with people like Kadi Nyang in Senegambia.
We're not sticking with McDonald. We're now going to other people.
Wait, hold on. Can I say something, or are you going to keep interrupting?
You can go ahead, but I'm just saying you're moving to other people. And I just want to let the audience know that you're going to other folks.
Okay,
this was
even so,
this was abandoning your boy.
Okay, so if you go to Eleanor Scarry's source, which is what I quoted earlier in the chat, actually even before that, literally the first thing I posted about West African hunter-gatherers is that their population was sparse in the first place before the Holocene, and in fact, we don't even have evidence of.
Go ahead. I was just saying.
What?
Say that. Go ahead. I'm just saying McDonald didn't say that, but go ahead.
Well, actually, McDonald actually was talking about the Holocene population of hunter-gatherers. He didn't mention what was happening in the Mongolian Hyperreed with the late Stone Age culture. He said that came around 12,000 BP. So before the Mongolian Hyperreed, the population was sparse. But let me just continue here. So Eleanor Scarry in the source I posted called the Stone Age Archaeology of West Africa, and I already posted it in the chat, and I think I posted it twice because I kept citing it. She says here, Microlithic industries with ceramics became common by the mid-Holocene, coupled with an apparent intensification of wild food exploitation. Between 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, these societies gradually transformed into food producers, possibly through contact with northern pastoralists and agriculturalists as the environment became more arid. However, hunter-gatherers may have survived in the more forested parts of West Africa until much later, attesting to the strength of ecological boundaries in this region.
Yeah, that still doesn't just.
So,
yeah, that still doesn't prove what I'm saying. I don't think you understand.
Yeah, so the point I'm making here is that the shift from hunter-gathering to agriculture in West Africa was a gradual process that people adopted and through contact with their neighbors as well. But even then, you still see their archaeological culture being very persistent in the archaeological record, which means that there wasn't necessarily a replacement of this tradition. And in fact, she even continues here, giving local examples. Hold on. Let me post this again in the chat for new people to see this.
And while you read that, I'll just read a genetic paper as well, because we can also.
Yeah, so I got it. So
we can also apply what I'm saying to genetics. I'm reading from the paper, "Carriers of Mitochondrial DNA Microhaplogroup L3 basal lineages migrated back to Africa from Asia around 7,000 years ago." It literally says in this paper that it appears that the E and L2/L3 expansions were strongest in Western Sahel and Western Guyana, where they replaced the majority of the oldest MT, L0 and L1, and Y chromosome A and B lineages. Folks got replaced by E. And also, it says in this same paper using genetics, and Eurasian origin and back migration to Africa has been proposed for the African Y chromosome, capital E.
inside Africa, frequency distributions of maternal L3 and paternal E lineages are positively correlated. This correlation is not fully explained by geographic or ethnic affinities. This correlation rather seems to be the result of a joint and global replacement of the old autochthonous male and female African lineages by the new Eurasian incomers. But anyways, just want to throw in a little DNA since we're leaving McDonald and going to other people. I'll bring
Okay, so
to like genetics.
So do you see the source I posted in the chat?
I don't. I see
wait.
the last post from Tiffany, 48 minutes ago. How 6 years?
Hold on.
You can't repost the same stuff because Clubhouse won't.
Yeah, Clubhouse doesn't let you. Okay, let me rejoin. Let me see if it.
But
Shut it up. It's up there now. In the chat.
Yeah, so this source is 2017. The McDonald's source was 1998, and which like this is based on new archaeological findings.
The McDonald book is not 1998. It's not.
Yeah, McDonald's book is 1998. That's what I said. So
no, it's not. It's 2003. That's not 1998.
Are you sure about that? Because if you go to the Google Books front page, it says 1998.
I'm reading volume 2, not volume 1.
I think we're reading the same volume here, and it says, well, the first volume was 1998, but
yeah,
anyways,
exactly. That's what I'm trying to get. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and also the source I read with the DNA is from 2018. So the DNA source I read 2018. So McDonald 2023, the DNA 2018. So you know.
Yeah. So. Eleanor Scary, actually, new research, like due to the very recent persistence of microlithic technology, actually goes against the replacement model for West Africans and hunter-gatherer populations, and she actually indicates that there might be some type of continuity that indicates descent. So I already quoted on page 6 where it's talking about the gradual adoption of food production. In page 5 through 6, where it's talking about microlithic industries with ceramics, and she also says on page 6 that ceramic and ceramic LSA assemblages in West Africa overlap chronologically, and that changing densities of microlithic industries from the coast to the north are geographically structured. And keep in mind that when it comes to ceramics, this is more so associated with the Sudanese populations that also were fishermen and had bone harpoons. And when it comes to the aceramic late Stone Age, these are more associated with the Shumlaka related population that eventually had settlements further north. But they both shared microlithic assemblages, so meaning that there was some type of common origin in that, but they just differed on ceramics. But anyways, she's saying here that they overlap chronologically, and that food production was gradual, and she's also saying here that hunter-gatherers have a record of survival, especially in the forest area of West Africa. And this, to me, like if this was just a pure replacement model, then I don't think the evidence would be pointing towards Gary's number one, overlapping assemblages, and number two, gradual food production. Keep in mind that when it comes to the absorption of hunter-gatherers in agricultural societies, this could be due to the fact that as people are discovering that their neighbors are adopting better methods of food production in a geographically hostile environment, they might as well abandon that lifestyle and switch to farming, which is literally what even the Niger Congo speaking populations, not the ones that came from the West African forest, but the ones that came from the Sudanese area, like literally drop fishing the same way. There's also another paper that Eleanor Scary wrote that is titled "Continuity of the Middle Stone Age into the Holocene." That's actually arguing for a very gradual and persistent genealogy that does indicate that hunter-gatherer culture survived.
All right, I'm going to read another genetic paper. This paper is titled "Genetic Variation Reveals Large-Scale Population Expansion and Migration During the Expansion of Bantu-Speaking Peoples." I'm just going to read a short, quick little section, not going to be long. It says, the Bantu expansion has been suggested to begin approximately 3,000, 5,000 years ago. Oh, that's right around the time the Sahara dried up. Interesting. Anyways, based on linguistic and archaeological inference, and originated in the Cross River Valley in the region of current eastern Nigeria and western Cameroon, groups that existed all over sub-Saharan Africa before the Bantu expansion were to a large extent replaced and / or assimilated by the Bantu-speaking groups, but some populations stayed relatively isolated in remote areas such as the Central African rainforest and the Kalahari Desert. Furthermore, traces of the assimilated groups can still be seen seen as specific characteristics for particular Bantu-speaking groups, such as unique genetic variants, language characteristics, and cultural practices. Even the DNA papers are saying that there was, to a large extent, replacement and assimilation. But I gotta hear from
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't listen to what you said because I'm reading this. My bad.
I mean, everybody else heard that's in the room. That's fine if you didn't hear it, because as long as everybody else in the room hears this. Just shoot. Are you still there, by the way? As well as you, Tyvon, are you there?
I'm here.
Oh, I know you're there, Adam. I heard you earlier. Just and Tyvon, I don't know.
So wait, okay, I'm just trying to track what the contention is here. That, sorry, Wonkwo? I don't, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce it. But his assertion is that there isn't a meaningful contribution of North African or Eurasian or some sort of pastoralist DNA into West Africa, or that the West Africa hunter-gatherer groups were not absorbed largely by a Bantu expansion into West Africa? What's the issue?
So my claim is that contrary to the replacement model or large-scale macro colonization model that Yashub and the Green Saharan are proposing, my proposition is that the proto Niger Congo speaking peoples and the late Stone Age hunter gatherers from the Central African rainforest population their relationship was not necessarily one of just it was not one of conquest largely, but rather cultural integration in which people were admixing and assimilating into agriculture due to the fact that it's feasible. I'm arguing against their claim that these people colonized and conquered the hunter-gatherers, and that's how the genetics integration happened, and that's how like these people were vanished or replaced. I'm going against that proposition.
Even though
it's my internet dropped out there, but it's the Bantus or the Bantu expansion.
Not quite the Bantus, but the Proto-Niger Congo speaking peoples and the late Stone Age hunter-gatherer population. But for the Bantu, like we do have, I already gave a counterexample, which I mentioned 1,000 times. So I'm not painting with a broad brush. I'm just telling them not to paint with a broad brush. I'm saying that largely there's not enough evidence to show that all the Bantu speakers or the Bantu expansion in large was like a unanimous domination of Pygmy-speaking peoples and
So the basal hunter-gatherer populations of West Africa are the plurality or majority of the DNA of modern West Africans? Would that be accurate to what you're saying here?
Sorry, me repeat.
That the basal or proto hunter-gatherer populations of West Africa is still the plurality or majority of the DNA of modern West Africans.
I don't know about majority, but they're well represented in our DNA.
And so the other DNA, the admixture of non-hunter-gatherer, who are these people and where do they come from? And I'm sure they came in waves into different times, surely, right? Or what would you assert there?
So when it comes to the ancestry of proto-Niger Congo speaking peoples, I can't really make a claim on that because we don't really have fossil evidence from the Holocene period that gives us their genome. What we do have fossil evidence of is the Sublaka remain in 8000 BP, which does have an individual with an A00 haplogroup, which is not said to be mirrored in the Bantu-speaking populations who did have E1B1A and E lineages.
So would the hunter-gatherers be predominantly E1B1A?
Based on the region of South or Northwest Cameroon, only we only have four fossils in the large, but only one of them was said to be related to the hunter-gatherers, and that was A00. And when it comes to West Africa, though, west of Cameroon, we literally have no fossil evidence for to extract DNA from whatsoever. The only fossil evidence we have is Iwo Eleru, which is not even said to be ancestral to these people.
Okay, and so you're going through the studies that does computational analysis to determine admixture events and migrations, and then it's trying to find the differences here in opinion.
Yes, and I was quoting earlier, Africa, the cradle of human diversity, which actually does show a high PCA cluster with West African farming populations and Central African hunter-gatherers, even those who are unadmixed, like the Umbuti.
Do the Umbuti have Neanderthal at all?
They might, but based on what I read, they didn't record admixture for the Umbuti.
So, but do you think that pastoral practices were transmitted through either migration or trade, or was it an indigenous phenomenon?
Yes, but not through the Bantu expansion. We don't have evidence of the proto-Bantu speaking peoples being pastoralists. In fact, according to Africa, the cradle of human diversity, 7,000 to 8,000 years ago, these people probably still would have been hunter-gatherers that were using Neolithic tools and had ceramics. The main pastoralist population that expanded south, and we find evidence of this in the ethnographic narratives with the Southern Cushitic peoples that probably did bring pastoralism to the Kwai speaking people such as the Nama. But for the Proto-Bantu, there were no pastoralists that spread cultures to spread pastoralism to the people.
Yeah. So, sorry, my internet keeps on dropping out here. So, Green Sahara, what's the rub? What's the beef here? I'm not catching it.
Well, the issue is, and the Shub also can clarify me on anything, but the main issue is that Bantu, what Shub and I are saying, is that Bantu people, or not even Bantu, excuse me, that West Africans, and by extension Bantus as well, essentially are colonizers. They colonized much of West Africa and Central Africa and Eastern Africa and South Africa because they were an outside population that came into these places and essentially took over the land and the people. And sure, some of it could have been peaceful, but a lot of it was not peaceful because it seems like entire languages disappeared. Like the Pygmies, they don't speak their original autochthonous language. They speak a Bantu. They speak a Bantu language. And in West Africa, it's believed that the peoples that were once they're completely vanished. Like the entire people themselves are gone. I read that when it came to Kevin McDaniel. And so,
yeah. But isn't that what I just heard? Like because basically maybe a plurality, but not a majority of the DNA of West Africans today is hunter-gatherers. The majority is not, and wouldn't that in itself suggest the admixture event of a outside population to back what you're saying, Grinsara? Like I don't understand what the
because the male lineage of modern West Africans is obviously E1B1A, which has like a northeastern origin, whereas the DNA of these West Africans is like L1, L2, and stuff like that, L0.
Yeah, which suggests a sex bias. And I mean, like we saw with R into Europe and in all sorts of different places where you see a paternal oriented sex bias that drives out and eliminates other male competition and women. That's
what Schumann are basically saying.
So what's wrong with that?
So what I'm disagreeing in is this total replacement of these hunter-gatherer populations. I think that when it comes to the language that Gary describes as cultural acquisition of agriculture by hunter-gatherers by being influenced by neighboring populations, I think this is a better model to say because we don't have positive evidence of fatalities. Like we don't even have fossil evidence at all to make that claim. So I think that would be the burden of proof for the one making that claim in the first place. But besides that, the main thing we do have evidence for is the gradual acquisition of food production by these populations. And when it talks about hunter-gatherer populations, quote unquote, vanishing, I would say that this is not necessarily vanishing as we describe it, like people being blotted off the map, but people abandoning their traditional modes of subsistence and adopting models by their neighbors, which is well supported in the archaeological record. In fact, Eleanor Scarry says that aceramic and ceramic traditions in this region of West Africa overlap very much in the archaeological record, and the aceramic late Stone Age culture actually persists very, very late in the archaeological record, which means that this culture persisted in the midst of food production and acquisition of different means of subsistence by the neighbors. So I don't think that this supports an evidence of
okay, so the rub is the assertion that either E1B1A is a indigenous hunter-gatherer male haplogroup, or it's a outsider male haplogroup, and because we don't have ancient samples, we cannot properly derive what the basal male haplogroup is there. But we have evidence to suggest E1B1A coming from the east into the west, and we also we can rely on, and studies have used this computational analysis to estimate admixture events over time, right? So I guess basically the big question is E1B1A a hunter-gatherer Y haplogroup in West Africa or not? That's basically, we don't know this for sure, but we can make some assumptions based on computational analysis.
Yeah, so I don't think any of us are disputing about the origin of E1B1A. I'm sure, I don't mind agreeing to the model that originated in North Africa and diffused from north to south. But for me, my main point of contention is the replacement versus the mosaic model. I hold to the mosaic model of West African history. That these groups were not like it wasn't a horde of black people that came around and like said like let's make war on these hunter gatherer groups and assimilated them. And the main tradition of the assimilation of hunter gatherers in that McDonald quoted was the myth of Dinga, which is a myth of imperialist expansion by the Ghana Empire. But this is not necessarily exclusive to hunter gatherers. The Ghana Empire also expanded into what we know today as Mauritania and Senegambia, and later on the Mali Empire, which is reflected in the Epic of Sunjata, broke free from the Ghana Empire and established their own kingdom, which means that that evidence cited for hunter-gatherer communities being adopted into, being dominated politically by agriculturalists. It was limited to the Ghana Empire, which is not exclusive to the hunter-gatherers. But besides that,
but hold on though. So, so because it sounds like you're accepting that E1B1A is not the indigenous male haplogroup to West Africa. First question, what is? And second question, why is that not more strongly represented in current male lineages in West Africa versus the mtDNA, where there's these basal L's that do persist in West Africa?
So the answer to that is I would say I don't know, because number one, there's no fossil evidence we have before the Holocene and even during the Holocene that represents the late Stone Age populations in West Africa, west of Shumlaka, that indicates any paternal haplogroup. So we're going.
Yeah, but there had to be one. So, like, what would your guess be?
Yeah, so we're going off of the assumption based on what the Green Saharan is saying, that it was haplogroup A, but this is based on a limited geographical area in northwest Cameroon that we're applying to the entire region of West Africa. So,
but what are the odds that it's A or E1B1A?
Well, it's probably not E1B1A, but we don't know if it's.
How does that? Okay, so assuming that, then because E1B1A is so dominant now, what does that suggest to you?
So when you see a frequency in the paternal haplogroup being in a population, that means that the male ancestors of these groups had a lot of kids, bro. So that's my assumption, that the Proto-Niger Congo speakers, when migrating from north to south, had a lot of kids with L.
With yeah, and then the A's didn't. And why? What does that suggest?
But even so, like, it might also be the case with paleodemography that the incoming Niger Congo populations had a larger population than the hunter-gatherers in the first place, because these hunter-gatherers were scattered. What you do find is dotted wavy line pottery being in a wider region of the Sahel, and
but then why is the maternal haplogroup persist, even assuming that logic of minor populations meeting major population? Like, why is the minor population in the mtDNA persisting and not the male?
I also look at that, but the main two maternal haplogroups I think are in West Africa are L1 and L0. I have to look at that. I can't answer for that one.
All right, so Adam is hitting the nail on the head, because everything he's saying is why I believe in the replacement model. So let me just quickly go over why I believe in the replacement model. So when it comes to the Shumlaka remains, by the way, we keep on saying A00 or Kankaro, but it's not just A00 that was found in the remains. It was like 3 males and 1 female. There was A and B found in the Shumlaka remains, A and B, not just A00. So let me explain why I go with this replacement. The A lineage, the B lineage, the mitochondrial DNA of these samples was L0 and L1, I believe. So here's the thing.
We know that humans have been in West Africa for a very long time. There's a recent paper that just came out in February titled Humans in Africa's Wet Tropical Forests 150,000 years ago. These were anatomically modern humans in West Africa 150,000 years ago. And when it comes to E1B1A, like I'm talking about the E1B1A lineage, EV38, that formed 41,400 years ago. And the TMRCA is like 39,300 years ago. E1B1A is fairly young. And there were already humans living in West Africa. When it comes to, like, for instance, mitochondrial haplogroup L0, it's believed that mitochondrial haplogroup L0 formed 154,000 years ago. Mitochondrial L0. Mitochondrial L1 is believed to have formed 111,000 years ago. Mitochondrial L2 is believed to have formed 107,000 years ago. Like, all of these L lineages go back like 100,000 years ago. They long predate E1B1A. And if we look at, for instance, haplogroup A00, haplogroup A00 formed 235,900 years ago. And if we look at haplogroup B, it formed 88,000 years ago. And again, we know that there were humans living in West Africa like 150,000 years ago. So if we have anatomically modern humans living in West Africa, the only haplogroups they can carry is haplogroup A and haplogroup B for the Y DNA, and mitochondrial L0, L1, and L2. And lo and behold, when we look at the Shumlaka remains, we find haplogroup A, we find haplogroup B. E1B1A is nowhere in the picture. So I would say, like, we see that these E1B1A markers today, what is their mtDNA? What is the mtDNA of modern E1B1A carriers? It's haplogroup L0, haplogroup L1, haplogroup L2 in West Africa. Who were these L0, L1, and L2 women mixing with over 100,000 years ago? Who were they mixing with? They were mixing with fellow A and B markers. But today they're mixing with E1B1A markers. Something happened because the dominant haplogroup in West Africa is E1B1A and not haplogroup A anymore. There was some type of replacement, some type of population turnover for these old female lineages to now be with a much younger haplogroup, E1B1A. I think it's just that plain, simple
and then
enough.
Sex bias, which we know in other parts of the world suggests something very unfortunate.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the population sample in Shumlaka, I'm just reviewing this paper. So what they found was that two individuals had the haplogroup B, while they found only one with the haplogroup A00, and it says that actually it's still present in applicable frequencies only in Cameroon, particularly amongst the Umbo and the Bangwa in the western part of the country. A00 is the oldest known branch of the modern human Y chromosome tree with a split time of 300,000 to 200,000 BP. And not only that, but so there's, like, if you look at, so, and this, I think this actually disproves your point, because what you find is that in a lot of Bantu speaking ethnic groups or Bantoid speaking ethnic groups today, who are predominantly of agricultural descent, what you find is that for some groups like the Umbo, their paternal haplogroup is majority of A00, and it's not E1B1A, meaning that this might bring doubt to the whole simplistic model of universal conquest of these groups. Why is it that in populations that speak a Bantoid language and Bantu languages, that they still carry a A00 haplogroup that's more related to these hunter-gatherer populations? And this, like,
come on, bro, come on. I'm saying that there was a complete replacement in West Africa, but we know the Bantu expansion. And Kevin Donald, I just read from Kevin McDonald, he even says this. In West Africa, the replacement was just
to the extreme. Like there's the people there just completely vanished. But when it comes to the Bantu expansion, he literally says, and so does other papers too, that the Bantus didn't completely wipe out the Pygmies, which is kind of obvious. We see Pygmies there today. So finding haplogroup B among Pygmies, finding haplogroup, among Pygmy and Bantu populations, finding haplogroup A0 among Pygmy and Bantu populations, like that's a given. We already know this. The Bantus did not completely wipe out the Pygmies because we can see them today. So what you're saying does not disprove what I'm saying. It actually still kind of proves what I'm saying. It actually completely proves what I'm saying in the fact that Bantus did subvert their power over the Pygmies, because the Pygmies aren't speaking their language. They're speaking a Bantu language. Those A00 people that you're mentioning, they speak a Bantu language. They don't speak a Pygmy language. The Pygmy language is dead. It's like Latin. It's gone completely. Actually, it's worse than Latin because no one knows what the Pygmy spoke. It's completely gone. At least with Latin, we know we have an idea of how it sounded, you know. But
what is the frequencies of A00 like west of Cameroon?
Yeah, so my bad.
I'll have to look that up.
It's almost like not there, isn't it? Like it's pretty low. We're talking single digits.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So So what I'm saying here is like when it comes to the replacement model though, like newer archaeological evidence, like I'm sorry to cite Seri for the 1,000th time, right? But newer archaeological evidence shows that there was a mosaic of persistence between the hunter-gatherer populations that was aceramic and those that did have ceramics coexisting at the same time. And those later aceramic hunter-gatherer populations gradually adopting agriculture. And when it comes to language acquisition, I already mentioned earlier with the example of Hausa west of Niger and Nigeria that although there was a lack of a political macro domination in these areas, these people still adopted the Hausa language because Hausa was a very useful language for trade. People can adopt language from different regions. For example, if I learn Mandarin while going to China, or if the China are establishing trade networks, although there might not be political domination, there might be economic integration in which people want to speak Chinese. And people adopt languages for different reasons. So I think that when it comes to excluding one language here, we're making a big assumption. But I did get the counter example what happened in Rwanda, because you did have the Twa speaking a Bantu language and also simultaneously being dominated by Bantu speaking populations. But I also showed a counter example of the Kuba having traditions of peaceful integration with Pygmy speaking peoples in Congo. So that's where I'm drawing the line. Like, I'm not even saying there's no evidence of domination whatsoever, because that's not true. What I'm saying is that you're painting with a broad brush here when there's counter examples to prove your claim.
All right, so I just want to hear, you are admitting that there was domination. You just don't think it was.
It wasn't unanimous.
Okay, that's all I wanted to hear. Hey, more. Did you get that, Adam? Did you get that? I want to make sure we have that on record so we don't ever have to have this argument again. You agree that there was a form of domination. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like I made that clear by citing Rwanda for like the 1,000th time here.
Yeah, but we had to like twist your arm into getting that. So you was not saying that.
All right, I literally said that, but okay.
Because, oh my gosh. By the way, anything you want to add more to that, or Adam, whoever? Because we've been talking about this for like probably 3 hours.
I mean, it's just like the timelines are wild. So it's like E1B1A is indigenous to West Africa. E1B1A carriers are indigenous to male line is indigenous to West Africa. It's haplogroup R is to Europe, basically. And we're talking a handful of thousands of years. Like, it's like, welcome to the show. You're the new kids on the block here. In relative time scales, like it's very, very recent, not indigenous in the scheme of things. But I mean, that's my bias coming out as a haplogroup I survivor. So maybe I'm just projecting my solidarity with the A's and B's in West Africa, confronting these E1B1A intruders. Shout out to A and B.
Hey man, we are all descendants of the colonized and the colonizer, of the enslaved and the kings.
And also, where like the haplogroup B and 150 is like very, very frequent in some like various Cameroonian groups like Fali and Udeme. So this would mean that like contrary to what do you call it? Your model of like, I think it was actually Yashu that said male replacement. For some reason, like a lot of the major ethnic groups in Cameroon with demographically large populations preserve their male lineage, and it's actually the converse of them adopting a Bantu language while having a predominantly indigenous paternal haplogroup that matched Sumlaka. But I already said that in West Africa, prior to the Holocene, we don't have any fossil evidence that we can genetically trace to any ancestry. We can't even genetically trace Iwo Eleru. We don't know the genetics of Iwo Eleru. Not only that, but so for West Africa, like even though we assume that their haplogroups might have been A and B, there's no fossil evidence to further investigate as of now.
All I gotta say is, again, according to a paper that came out in February 2025, we know that there was humans in West Africa 150,000 years ago, excuse me. And we know that the only anatomically modern human haplogroups to exist on the planet in West Africa would have been A and B markers, not even B markers, excuse me, A markers, and would have been mitochondrial L0 and L1. Only humans to exist on the planet. And
okay, and the point is there. I don't see the point there, but even then, the Middle Stone Age populations that originated 200,000 years ago through the and migrated and went to West Africa through the Senegoan culture and Lupemban cultures already were dying out by 4,000 BP, and the last remnant of that was probably the Iwo Eleru fossil. And not only that, but they also were sparsely populated in West Africa, and a lot of them didn't survive the Ogolian hyper-reed. And this is what it said in the earliest quote I posted in the chat, where it says that prior to the Holocene, population in West Africa was very.
I hope you're not saying what McDonald said, because he didn't say it was very sparse.
This is not from McDonald, and he wasn't. So McDonald was mentioning after the Holocene. The late Stone Age in West Africa didn't originate until after the Holocene.
Hold on, it says, an hypothesis advocating the existence of now disappeared hunter-gathering cultures in West Africa stemming from coastal and forest Ogolian refuge populations has already been advanced. In terms of material culture, the LSA, late Stone Age traditions of sub-Saharan West Africa show little evidence of direct cultural contact with the Saharan sphere until the recent Holocene. It's in the Holocene where things started to change, bro.
Yeah, and the late Stone Age populations didn't expand throughout West Africa until the Holocene.
Right, and then they vanished because, again, additionally, one can advance, and a recently recorded language isolate from northeast Nigeria as more concrete linguistic evidence for a vanished people than has yet come from equatorial forests. Following the model of interactive assimilation advanced by Vincent for the Central African Pygmies, one may assume a gradual process of absorption for these groups. The most northernly, so yeah, they were in the Sahel, they're in the north. The most northernly vanished hunter-gatherers living in the middle Niger, that's the Sahel, and the southern Sahara/Sahel, would have first encountered Saharan immigrants in the mid-Holocene. So yes, I agree, there was a migration of West African hunter-gatherers into the Sahel or into the southern Sahara, but they vanished when these Saharan migrants came in.
Actually,
we keep going in circles.
This is where the circle is going, because I'm going to keep quoting to you, Scary, who's citing new
You
archaeological
can only
data.
quote one person, right?
Hold on, wait. So I'm going to keep quoting Scary, who is posting new archaeological data that's done by recent excavations, not from 2000 or 1998, but from 2017, which is a new decade of research where there's new fossils, new microliths. I mean, not fossils. There's new microliths and ceramic assemblages being discovered. And what you find is that there was an overlap of the aceramic and ceramic LSA assemblages. Now, the aceramic assemblages originated in the Central African rainforest and migrated West Africa, while the ceramic late Stone Age cultures are said to have originated in the Sahara Sudanese area. However, the fact that they both have microliths do assume that the Saharan Sudanese populations got these from the Central African rainforest populations. And lastly, so I'm gonna cite where the new, because really Scary is just I think she's doing a literature review. She's compiling a bunch of studies that were happening from McDonald's time to 2000 to 2017. So I'm going to quote the primary source evidence for where she got that from, with the aceramic and ceramic late Stone Age assemblages overlap.
My thesis is that and I think it's the Yoruba, but the populations of West Africa with the highest quote unquote most archaic DNA, which initially was being pushed as this sort of interbreeding event between archaic humanoids and modern Homo sapiens in West Africa, but has been, I think, with a lot of work, revised to suggest admixture events with earlier branches of the Homo sapien, sort of the stump, the two tree stump model, right? That basically the populations of West Africa with the highest frequency of this population group are probably the ones who have the greatest amount of hunter-gatherer West African DNA. The Yoruba, I think, some tribes of the Yoruba being the outlier at like 19%.
Hold on, let me do something really quick. But yeah, man, long story short, I do agree that domination happened in some areas like the Ghana Empire and Rwanda, but I disagree with that belief that language shift indicates total domination by a group of another, because there's multiple reasons why people can adopt languages. And a counterexample I gave was people who were not politically dominated by the Hausa speaking their language for trade purposes. And I posted a source on that earlier when I talked about the Zongos that they established. The main ways that Hausa operated in the west of Niger and west of Nigeria was through caravans. Essentially, like, you had Islamic scholars who would travel west and establish like temporary mobile libraries and trade colonies with people and more powerful states like the Ashanti. In fact, what it shows rather is that Hausa were like the Hausa diaspora west of Nigeria were primarily diplomats and Islamic scholars that had a large cultural capital, but not political capital. But my point is that people were adopting their languages, but not necessarily being politically subjugated to them. And I believe there's other examples of this in Africa as well, but this is just the main one I can think of.
Yeah, all right. And in closing, my main argument would be haplogroup L0 and L1 and L2 are over 100,000 years ago, and we have humans in West Africa from like 150,000 years ago all the way up until the Shumlaka population. U1B1A is a very young lineage. It's 41,000 years old, likely forming somewhere in northeastern Africa. And today, West Africa is dominated
by E1B1A. It is not dominated by haplogroup A and B, and it begs the question: if anatomically modern humans were in West Africa for over 150,000 years, who are these L0, L1, and L2 women mixing with? Obviously, the only humans for them to mix with is haplogroup A, haplogroup B. In ancient times, and we even find it in fossil remains. It begs the question: why is E1B1A today the dominant haplogroup in West Africa, and not the A and B markers? Why are E1B1A men, a very young lineage, 41,000 years old, with women who are over 150,000 years old, according to their mtDNA, and not with men who are of the same age, which are the A and B markers? Why is that? I would say it's replacement model. So that's my argument.
Before you close the room, I just want to save all the sources you posted in this chat to put in my notes so I can read them on my own time.
Let me
hold on. So let me do that first. But also, my counter argument to that would be, sure, you find E1B1A predominant in West Africa, but keep in mind that this is a region west of Cameroon. You're comparing genomic data with modern West Africans and fossils that we don't know to exist. So we're guessing that the lineage is A based on the chronology of a divergence with haplogroups throughout history. But really, like, the data can show, like, if we had a fossil that had like a very divergent haplogroup, hypothetically, then this might change the population structure of Africa. But pretty much when we're assuming that A and B were probably in this region before E1B1A came to West Africa, we're basing this off of the fossil data we have from hunter-gatherer groups that we do know to have fossil data from, which is in Cameroon and Central Africa. But even in Cameroon and Central Africa, there are Bantu-speaking populations and farmers that have primarily B and A haplogroups. And I already pointed to the Umbo in Cameroon, the Fale in Cameroon. You also have some of the Bangwa who are not even Bantu but Bantoid speakers. So there's I think there's counter examples to the complete E1B1A-ization of these people in Cameroon as well, which is where we find the fossils in the first.
Again, my counter argument is all pygmy peoples speak Bantu languages, and they carry haplogroup B and A. So these groups in Cameroon who speak Bantu languages, they're no different than Central Congo pygmies who also speak Bantu languages. No different. Bantus got them speaking their language.
I have a feeling that I think that.
Are you speaking? Hello? You were saying something, Adam? Or am I messing up? Do you hear him, Tyvon?
So what is this main argument here of where E1B1A originated, or like when it settled?
No, it's about whether E1B1A wiped out the predominantly wiped out the male indigenous, like, hunter-gatherer West African populations. But I was just going to say that before my internet drops out again, that the archaic, the ghost population, right, in West Africa, which originally was suggesting some sort of recent admixture with archaic humanoids, but it's been revised, I think, rightly, to a more nuanced perspective with this non-tree model, but like kind of two-tree or two-stump model, that the population groups, I think the Yoruba amongst the highest, or groups within the Yoruba, the highest, those population groups with the highest, quote-unquote, ghost population admixture are actually the populations that have the greatest contribution of hunter-gatherer populations in West Africa. And that those that are low in that frequency are devoid of significant or measurable hunter-gatherer populations in West Africa.
Mm-hmm. And also, I forgot to add this in my counter as well.
The DNA also supports what I'm saying. And I can quote things even past 2017. I can quote things, post things and quote things even in like 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025. I'm not restricted to just one person from 2017. I can quote various genetic studies as well.
Well, yeah. Well, funny enough that that's a sneak diss, but Everyone Scary actually has another source from 2021 that actually complexifies the data even more and shows the continuity from Stone Age farming. Sorry, not farming. Stone Age uh, cultural industries that don't only go to the late Stone Age, but from the Middle Stone Age into the Holocene. We can get into those sources as well, but I also do quote Jan Van Sina as a counterexample to the method that to the notion that Bantu unanimously dominated pygmies, because what Jan Van Sina says about the Luba is that the Luba actually say that pygmies had distinct social roles and autonomy in forest areas, and oftentimes pygmy people were not really subordinated. And he actually says that pygmy groups had a complex political organization with client relationships rather than outright domination. Pygmy groups lived in forested zones adjacent to Lunda territories and maintained distinct lifestyles, sometimes engaged in trade or alliances, but not necessarily incorporated fully into the Lunda political hierarchy. And it also says there's actual times where the Bantu kingdoms claim that their civilizations were founded by the pygmies as the arbiters of civilization. And it says that some Bantu-speaking populations, like the Kuba, for example, say that pygmies taught them about nature spirits, had mastery of the land, and taught them the prohibition of And for anyone who wants to source on this, is called Out in the Rainforest Toward a History of Political Tradition in Equatorial Africa by Jan Van Sina. Jan Van Sina was able to reconstruct the entire history of the Congo Basin rainforest through archaeology and oral traditions, and I think even linguistics too.
I just want to hear one more time. You did say that that there was, in some elements, conquering. Correct? You do believe that there was some elements of assimilation and expansion and conquering. Just want to hear that one more time. I want to make sure I get that.
Yes, on the... and I gave Rwanda as an example.
Oh, you said yes? Okay. Just want to make sure of that. All right. We can move the conversation. You there, Moore?